Welcome, dear viewers, to a new episode of Dialogue Horizon. As we promised last week, that we'll continue on the messages used to be sent by the General Burhan in many occasions, and to cast some shadow on the progress of development of the framework agreement through the workshops. Last week we covered one of the workshops. It was the workshop of dismantling committee and the proposals for revitalization of it on new terms. This time we'll continue on the same issue of the developing story or the ongoing concern of many people these days, internationally and nationally, about the developments in Sudan and about their hope that things will settle and cool down in the coming few weeks. That's why I'm happy to host in this episode two of our activists, and they are very much concerned about and following. They are also following what is going on. We have our friend Osman Wash. Osman Wash is the vice president of the LPG, LGP, Liberation and Justice Movement, and also we have our friend Associate Professor Samani Hanoun. As we always introduce him, as he's basically an economist, but he's a politician because he works since the onset of the revolution of December 2018. He was part and he's still part of what is happening. Welcome both of you to this episode.
Welcome and thanks for this special invitation.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, let's start our first question to our professor to my right, Professor Samani Hanoun. Professor Samani Hanoun, if we can recall that recently the Army Commander-in-Chief, General Burhan, and the President of the Sovereign Council, Lieutenant General Burhan, he used to take the chances, any chance of any military function, so that through it he sends messages at large, not to the military only, but to all people. The recent one is this week, or few days ago, it was in the Damadin garrison, military garrison, or this area, military area of Damadin, Blue Nile. It's an area which used to be hot and so some civil wars were at that time, but now it's a little bit cool. But still in that area, Blue Nile, there is the almost ethnic problems, the conflicts, the confrontation, which claimed lives of innocent civilians from both sides of two ethnicities. Anyhow, it is now Blue Nile is becoming an area of concern to Sudan because of the ethnic development and confrontation. The messages are sent by President Burhan this time through this military function. First, he said that the army it's very important to keep the army intact, to keep the solidarity of the army. And to also at the same time ask nobody or the others, meaning the civilians, should not intervene in this, in the restructuring of the army or talking about the army, but he said in the transitional period, which means that afterward maybe, but in the transitional period, they said they are not allowed to speak about the army and its solidarity. Also, he spoke about the rumors that the ambassadors and the international intervention of especially some ambassadors, different countries, they are a little bit started to be deeply involved, but he's not warning us. We're not warning, but he's drawing the attention of these people to keep distance from directly getting involved in the political also, he mentioned something that maybe he claimed that the army did not recruit any mercenaries, whether sent to Yemen or to any, no mercenaries in the army. Finally, he asked the internal, the conflicting groups, the political groups that they should come to a consensus. They should hurry up and take some speedy steps to get to a consensus, or not 100%, maybe any reasonable consensus,
Majority.
majority, so that they can go a step ahead. And finally, which is good, he commended the efforts and the work of the partners of the framework. He meant the tripartite, the Troika, and and IGAD, and the four countries. So from this, what I said from this message, what is your comment on why he keeps telling people in military functions about the governance?
Thanks to Dialogue Horizon for this opportunity to share these hot issues in Sudan during the recent week. General Burhan kept to send some messages for any military events, and he used to send, especially during the recent event, he said range of messages to emphasize one fact, that the civilian should not intervene in the military discourse, especially during the transitional period. From Damazin, he sent range of messages to different stakeholders in the framework agreement and the civilians involved in the political discourse. And for your information, the Damazin represent symbol for December Revolution, because historically it was incepted in 13 December of 2018. Damazin was the first state that involved beside Atbara and Nahr al-Nil and al-Qatarif. So I think he took this special movement to send message to the revolution makers and the partners of the agreement from Damazin. And also he kept to send these messages frequently to inform all stakeholders that transitional period with a special exception. That means he emphasized non-interference of the diplomats in the armed forces and the issues or the discourse of the armed forces. His message always emphasized one fact, that during transitional period the civil leaders are not eligible to address the issues of the armed forces. And also, finally, he confirmed that armed forces not much concerned with the mercenaries sent outside or other soldiers who are fighting against money. And he emphasized also his appreciation to the effort exerted by all stakeholders in the peace process. I think General Burhan, he kept to emphasize this special roadmap for the civilian, that you should take the right way and you should keep away from the armed forces, especially during the 2 years or the remaining 2 years of the transitional period, because he mentioned in a former message that armed forces will be under civil elected led government. That means the military forces will be subjected to the power of the elected civil government, not the transitional government. I think this is a clear message to the civilians who are involved in the reorganizing the security forces in Sudan, as mentioned, according to the agreement framework. So he wants to delay the interference of the civilians after election, after 2 years. But for the moment, he doesn't emphasize any role for the civilians during the transitional period. So I think that will create some sort of contradiction with the framework agreement, in which they emphasize some sort of reform that to create a single armed forces in Sudan. So this message sometimes creates some inconveniences and some confusion sometimes, as if there are some drawbacks in the agreement, or you need to add something. So that is
or hidden agenda. Or
yeah. So that will confuse stakeholders in the peace process, as mentioned before by the commander and comrade Yasser Arman, when he addressed some events in Shandi. Also, he talked about disagreement by some activists. They accuse that the general, he want to violate the contract or the agreement of the general agreement. So such messages sometimes create confusion.
Give negative.
Yeah, a lot of messages.
Okay, that's very, very important.
Yeah.
If we go to our politician, Osman Washit, having heard what Professor Samani Hanoun said, I was also going to ask you about this. He mentioned Lieutenant General Burhan. He mentioned in Damadin that the army will be under the command of the civilians at the right or suitable time. He did not list something, we consider it something ambiguous. Some people, they consider it something intended to be ambiguous like this. Because when you say, he could have said, the army will be under civilian command or civilian leadership as soon as general elections are finished and civilian elected government comes. But when he said at the suitable time, this gives some doubt. What is your feeling?
I saw every time he's right in saying that it is the army will be under the civilian after the election, because it's a matter of mandate. It should be known that at the time of transition, there is no mandate from the Sudanese parties about who is to be mandated to govern. Always, at the interim period, is transitional one, and it is not mandated to make the reforms needed in every classes of the community, security or otherwise. So the problem is that the latest government of the interim government widened the role of the transitional government. That makes a lot of confusion, especially speaking of transitional justice, speaking about transforming military, everything. The transformation in the process need to be mandated. So he always reminds the civilian parts or the politicians in the country that any changes in the military should be from a mandated elected people, elected politicians. At that, they will be government mandated from the population of Sudan to make the changes necessary in every aspect of life, military or otherwise. That is, I think the message is clear. But the problem is that from the early beginning, this security committee who take the power after President Bashir, making on the two roles, military, which is an organ of government of a state, not organ of government, and he is also as a transitional sovereign council. He became a politician and making compromises with political parties. This makes the role of President Burhan very difficult to clear it up. So the mess is coming from these two roles, as a military man and also as a sovereign leader, president, speaking to the political parties. So it makes a lot of differences in this issue.
For him.
Yeah, that is, in every state, he came to the military, he will speak thoroughly that it is not the role of civilians or at least the political party to make the changes necessary. It is a military who is to make that changes, all the reform necessary in all, not only military, but all security organs, because we are speaking about policing and also security and all these things, intelligence and other things. So these are the role of mandated government. The other thing he is also mentioning every time is the interference of others in the politics and how they are supporting. He said, and in always saying that we accept or appreciate the role played by the trilateral mechanism, which is led by UN, African Union, and IGAD, that is one, and also the supporting quadral led by maybe U.S. and others also in the region like Saudi Arabia and Emirates. So he's appreciating their role, but there is a lot of media about their intervention in Sudan. And also the masses is speaking, most money of those ambassadors had crossed the line in many cases in the Sudanese politics. So this is important to remind the masses that these things is acceptable to the extent they are supporting our transition, and we need them to make that support. This is the issues he's always in his mind every time he goes. This is because it is on the podium he speaks to the masses. So he take the condition that happened to make that message clear.
But both of you, he said this message of the intervention of the ambassadors as the mechanism. But ambassadors are diplomats; they know their limits. Unless they get a green light, they cannot go like the American ambassador. He went all the way far in the north, and the others the diplomats, they will not exceed the limits which they know unless they get the approval from somebody.
And I think what is important for the armed forces, number one, the withdrawal from the political arena. This is something appreciated. And number two, to set up a unified armed forces. These two agendas are most important for Sudanese people, because Sudanese people are worried from ethnic conflict and from any sort of a new rebels movement in the country. So creating a single armed forces, unified armed forces for all armed force movement in Sudan is an important issue for Sudanese people. I do agree that any foreign interveners will not be appreciated definitely by Sudanese people. But for instance, the Sudanese people are in a dispute position. So they want to reconcile the positions with the support of international community. And this is especially headed by the UN, by the quadrilateral and the trilateral mechanism. All of them, they are working in order to bridge the gap between the different conflicting parties in Sudan in order to resume the civil democratic transformation in the country. The most important two agenda, the withdrawal and the setup of unified armed forces in Sudan. I think this is what is so important for Sudanese people today.
Okay,
Yeah.
that is very well. I think we spent good time on this question. We have a lot of questions. So we move to another important issue. Last time, as I mentioned in the introduction of the episode, that last time we talked about the dismantling committee and revitalization, because it was one of the issues of the framework, important issue of the framework agreement, which led to the workshop which held and finished, I think, by now.
Roadmap, yeah.
Another issue in the same framework, very important and very sticky and very muddy, and causing a lot of controversy and acceptance and disapproval, which is the Juba Agreement, 2020, October Juba Agreement. Some groups, some factions, some groups, those who signed the framework agreement, they are talking about the importance of opening and amending the Juba Agreement, because, as they say, that it did not get or did not fulfill the terms of reference of the agreement or the articles, so like the repatriation of the displaced people, like stopping wars. No war in Darfur, it's erupted again. The compensation and land, the displaced people, even the military arrangements, which is called for the reintegration of the troops of this armed struggle part to be integrated in the army.
Yeah.
But they forgot one thing very important, that they did not specify or they did not ask this about the number, how many these troops, because it should have been part of the agreement. Because now we hear that many people, many manufacturers are trying to recruit newcomers, so that they can enlarge their membership. This is one of the loopholes. That's why those who are calling for the amendment or reopening of the
Track also,
the
5
other is the track. It's the tracks, the 5 tracks created a big problem in the east. So others, they say it is a red line. They are not willing to touch or to make any amendment or to change the agreement. This is especially the democratic bloc of the FFC, and especially the 2 big armed struggle movements, Justice Jem, Justice Equality, and Sudan Liberation Movement, Minawi and Jibril. They are adamant that they are not willing, or they will not accept touching the. How can we solve this dilemma?
Yeah, let me clear first that the empowerment removal committee had last time had done and were criticized very largely about his work done last time, and they are now renewing the call for another empowerment removal or removal committee. It's again saying that the process is going to be launched without any intervention of judges and prosecutors, and this thing will be very difficult, because if you alienate justice from every action on the community, that means it is lawless. So if it will be a political one, and we are politicizing this committee again, this will be another problem, and I think it is better not to call for something like that. If any way to make that the dismantling of the regime or something should be according to law, not in a political committee. That is one thing. About the Juba agreement, I myself was being criticizing this agreement at that time, because it is, we always speak about problem of Sudan in Darfur, like, or in East Sudan, but they are speaking about the problem of Darfur in Sudan. They're making, because if you are making tracks, that means you are dividing the country from the very beginning. That is one of the issues that happens at that time. But still, honoring of agreement is very important. Now, those parties, the same political parties and the same sovereign council leaders who make that agreement of Juba. Now, if they are speaking solely from one side to revisit this agreement, that means it is not honoring the agreement that signed only months ago, or maybe 1 year or something. Even the implementation had not gone far. If you make an implementation, and within the context of implementation, if there happen problems, then you can review how to manage it for the best of the people. But you didn't start implementation of an agreement, and you are saying we can revisit. That means you are not honoring the agreement. I am in the place to say that it is not the time to make that review now. Let us go forward, go on trying to do the best to make the agreement on the ground, and let us see what the side effects, what happens from this implementation. We can, after that, we can revisit that agreement. But before we are going to, because it's still, everyone said that only the political power sharing is happening, but other things which are speaking about the repatriation of IDBs, security issues, integration of military, and also the economic wealth sharing, and all these things didn't happen yet. So let us move forward to try to the best we can, as the government, as the politicians, as movements, to make that happen in Darfur or everywhere in Eastern Sudan or South Sudan or even North Sudan, because they have tracks in there. But we can do that. But completely before any action of implementation, you are going to go back for revisiting, that means will not happen because it will be a problematic. Already there is others are opposing this agreement. That means you are not honoring the agreement you signed only a year ago.
Okay, that's very good.
Yeah,
What's
I
your
think
comment?
for December Revolution, peace is a central slogan raised during the rally of revolutions. You have freedom and peace. Peace is a central issue for December Revolution. And from day one, the revolution makers start and involve in direct negotiation of revolutions. You have freedom and peace. Peace is a central issue for December Revolution. And from day one, the revolution makers start and involve in direct negotiations with the armed forces in Juba in order to maintain peace in Sudan. So there are some opponents to the peace from the beginning. And I think this is why this bloc of peace or Juba partners are reluctant about these members who again appear in FFC. Just their appearance, they will create unconducive environment for dialogue. And this is why they start to be very reluctant about involvement in the framework agreement because they are hesitant. They know the opinions of these members because they are ex-members in FFC. Some members again appear for a second time. We define the December Revolution owned by the people of Sudan. No need to repeat the same faces again. This is our own judgment. That you have to pave the way for new leaders in FFC in order to address the issue because these people, they were failed during the 4 years to maintain peace in country. And this is why I think the democratic bloc headed by the leaders, Minnawi and Dr. Jibril, they are reluctant about leaders of the FFC who appear again in media. So that will complicate the matter. My advice is for FFC should introduce new leaders that can address the problem in most moderate way because some leaders, they have own opinions about Juba agreement. And again, they are in charge in this agreement. So that complicate and create unconducive environment to set dialogue with this group. I think now there is some discussions with the military components in order to bridge the gap between these two blocks, the old FFC and the democratic bloc. And this is why people are worried. The December Revolution, as we define it in day one of the revolution, it is owned by Sudanese people. So there is no need to polarize and centralize leadership. All Sudanese people involved in December Revolution. So we have to make the framework for all Sudanese people. And no need to repeat the same person again.
Not all, but I beg your pardon.
Just a little, it will complete. That will complicate the matter. Because people, they carried the problem forward. Again, they borrow the same old problem. But if you have new faces, people will be ready and relaxed to deal with them. So why the democratic bloc is very reluctant? Because they saw some faces. They know their opinion about the agreement. For December Revolution, again, I emphasize that peace is important. And revising the Juba agreement, we mentioned in the first months when the trilateral mechanism of Norway and UK and the US, they proposed to revise the agreement because there are some drawbacks in the agreements. And it was failed to realize peace. If you study peace before agreement and after agreement, you will see there is substantial differences because there is breakthrough in tribal conflict, breakthrough in ethnic conflict in the Blue Nile, breakthrough everywhere again. So complicate the matter. People, they talk about to revise the peace according to the events currently in the peace blocks or the war affected areas. So I think again, I will repeat, that peace is important for December Revolution, and we have to go ahead in order to include the other remaining armed forces outside the agreement, like Al-Hilu and Abdul Wahid Noor and others. They should involve in the peace process. And also we send message to leader Minawi and Jibril, please go through the agreement and study positively in order to enhance peace in our country and to go ahead.
Okay.
Yes.
Also, adding to what Professor Samani Hanun said, the signatories, the FFC signatories of the framework agreement, they don't mind and they will accept that they are trying to get Jibril, Dr. Jibril and Minawi on board. But on condition that they are allowed to be on board as heads of the two armed struggles, not as representatives of the democratic faction. And this is, it created a lot of difficulties because Minawi and Jibril, they insisted that they will join under the umbrella of the democratic faction. The others are putting their joining the agreement conditional as leaders of the two armed struggle. What is your comment on this?
FFT, the Central Committee or Central Council, it is speaking about to go back to the first agreement that make them in a government. They want to go just to rule. But they are not speaking about solving the problem in the widening spectrum. So they only saying that the 25th decisions by the sovereign leader has made them unable to govern. And now they want their partners at that time to come back for them to lead the country as they want. But they are not speaking about solving the problem in a wider spectrum as everybody is to be joined. Because already many of the political parties and political ideas were being alienated from this process of the transitional process. That makes them difficult to go further in solving the problems and to make that the transition happen. Because now we are almost 3 years now, the transition is not going anywhere. Our history about the transitional government in 1958 and 1984 was very clear. Was very clear that only a year time elections will be happening. Now in 3 years we are not able to make any process in the process of transitional authority, because this makes them, they don't know exactly what they are want. They want to transfer the community, the Sudanese parties. That will not happen without mandate. So everybody is speaking that you failed in the 3 years to make that happen. You are coming back with only that group that failed once again. That will not happen. Even from the military, it will be difficult. Even for Burhan or in the sovereign military will accept that issue. So it is unlikely that even though those two comes to them to join for a government, it will be a failure also. Because that was the failure that we practiced as the Sudanese parties in the last 3 years. So my advice is saying that let us open this framework agreement. Everybody will join and make a timelines for elections and how to deal with the laws and the committees to run the election in a fairly manner, to make a mandate for people who are able to transform with a mandate from the Sudanese masses.
Okay, that's very clear.
I think there are some group trying to control power without authorization from the Sudanese people. And this is the rally. People now are working very hard to capture power without any authorizations or mandate from the Sudanese people. This is actually create this unconducive environment because people are running after power without any delegation from the nations or the people. So we should be very careful about these positions. especially in the transitional period, we need to broaden the scope of participations of all Sudanese people. Exclusion attitude in this politics complicate the matter. Let us widen the scope of participation. Let us give chance to all people who believe in change and people who believe in the principles of the December Revolution to join the change. Why not? So closing the door will complicate the matter. People, they would like to serve their countries. They would like to serve their nation. So why you are
closing the door.
closing
You
the
agree
door,
that you agree that they should not close the door, but they should lead.
Yeah.
In my opinion, they should lead because they are not mandated by the people, by the revolution.
By revolution.
They took the revolution. These people, the same people, now they were the leaders of the revolution of December. So we don't have to undermine their role because, but at the same time, we ask them to be more flexible and open the doors for others who are believers in the framework agreement and who believe that Sudan should go for peace and tranquility through this agreement.
Yes, you have the right to lead, but you don't have the right to exclude the people.
Okay. Let us go back. Let us go to the very important also issue. Recently, these people very confused by two visits of two important personalities, VIPs of Egypt and Turkey. The heads of the intelligence, Abbas Kamil of Egypt came last week and followed by Hakan Gidan, the Turkish, very strong. He is number 2, by the way. Very strong, very influential in Turkey, and he's very smart. They both visited Sudan. Many people are confused about what is the main purpose. Very status about Abbas Kamil.
We already know the relations between Sudan and Egypt, and also with in Turkey also, because they have been operating in Sudan for a very long time. We know Turkish background from the Osmani time. They are there, and they have these contacts, especially in Darfur and everywhere. So the Egyptians are also, for some time in the international arena, they had been excluded for very long. And they are observing the matter in Sudan for very closely. Anyway, but when things are almost falling apart, they might say, it is time to say our word. So they came in. Egyptians are coming in.
Egyptians are all known from the beginning of the revolution.
But they are not part. They are not part of the triangular group. They are not there. They are just observing for a very long time. Yes. But what we have seen in what they have seen in the 3 years, they know any progress. Things are deteriorating politically in Sudan. So they may see that it is time to hand out.
Another thing, yes, I agree with you, but some people, they say that one of the objectives, especially of the Turkish intelligence head, about the West, and you know about Chad and Central Africa. As if there is a competition to gain control of Central Africa.
Let us go back to the history. Egypt and Turkish, they are partners during Ottoman Empire, and this is a political rally between West, headed by UK and the US, and this group, this is an Asian partners who control Sudan during the Turkish rule that ended by the Mahdist revolution in 1881. So again, I think they want to recover the lost empire in Sudan. Why they are visiting these two intelligence?
What about the issue of the West?
The issue actually, they are worried because they are excluded from the current.
Sudan, the both borders.
Yeah, they were excluded from the current political process. They don't play any role for Egypt and Turkish. This is mainly headed by the bodies we have mentioned several times, the UK, the IGAD, and they are far from the decision. So they want to play a role in the new Sudan. And they are totally excluded from the process. They are running to have a share in the pile of
Egypt,
power.
I agree with you. Egypt is sad, but Turkey, this for the first time we see Turkey in the recent history after their Ottoman empire. But some people, they say that the coming is mainly for Central Africa, as if there is a competition, and the Chad.
The overall the overall world system is now changing, is moving. You know, even if you see what is going on in the borders of Soviet Russia, especially with Ukraine, and how the clashes between the West all over together, European Union and America against Russia, and also in a way or another in China and this region of Taiwan, these things are making a political change in overall world. You know, Turkey has been a NATO member, but always in a clash with the European Union, because they are Turkey has been excluded to join the European Union, so he had no real place there, but he already part of NATO. So he is making this balance of powers. Everybody is watching, and they have to be clear that Turkey had been the empire before, the biggest empire before, especially in the Arab world and this region, is the biggest empire in this region before this new order. So if things are changing, he might revisit his places he had been there, and already there is ties with Sudan and other countries of the region with Turkey. You know, the relations with Qatar at the time of blockade that happened to Qatar was very immense, to the extent that they became the savior of Qatar at that time. So it is a complicated political arena which we are now facing in the whole world.
Yeah, in addition, we can add, yes, a world map is restructuring currently because of the Russian war against Ukrainians. So I think these are historical alliance between Turkish and Egypt. They are trying to investigate the matter, and they sent especially the intelligent officers, not diplomats. So they want to see where the direction, and also to investigate the new roadmap of Sudan. Sudan now taking new track. The new Sudan, especially after December revolution, totally different from before. So they want to play a role in the foreseeable Sudan, the new Sudan. I think for that reason, they sent these intelligence officers to the Sudan in order to investigate about the new directions of policies in Sudan. And I think one more important, that the food problem in the world, that enforce all the people to move to Sudan in order to have some role in agricultural production to ensure food for their nations. So Egypt and Turkish, and they are part of the Muslim world. And before them, there is one committee came from Saudi Arabia, especially to create Islamic alliance, and which is military alliance, actually among the countries. So the world map is restructuring, and any country try to have some strategic relations with different nations. A central country like Sudan will be target to these countries, and also they need to know where the country's directions of the government, whether the directions of the rule, because they have interests, they have investments, they have very strong ties with this country. So they need to be close to the decision, where is taking, which directions is taking. I think for package of reasons, Turkish has very strong ties with Sudan, and Egypt as well. Needless to repeat, the ties of historical and geographical and social different ties with Sudan. So both of them are concerned with the issue of the Sudan. So they have to keep in touch with the current events in Sudan and to be close to the decision-making process in order to ensure the roadmap of future for the Sudanese nation.
But yes, many people, they say that, okay, the Egyptians, it's known that they are involved. The Egyptian intelligence head, he came not only one time, he came sometimes secret and sometimes openly. But many times, and many people, they know not in this regime or this revolution. Since the independence of Sudan, Egypt played a very important role, always playing a role, making sure that Sudan does not go at large. They want to keep Sudan intact to their benefit, They want to protect their interests
interest.
and benefits and then consider it as security. But I'm talking about the Turkish. This is maybe the first time a leader, a top intelligence. They say he's almost number two in Turkey after Erdogan. But people they say that the visit of both is not coordinated. Do you think it's coordinated or just coincidence that they met at the same time? Because the issue, definitely the issue of the Turkish intelligence is different than the issue of the Egyptian intelligence. Some people they say that the Turkish intelligence is concerned about the west of Sudan. What is going on in West Sudan, in Central Africa and Chad. Central Africa is, as known, is full of diamond and full of very rare minerals.
Precious metal.
And now Central Africa and Chad, the political systems are a little bit
Yeah.
unstable. So what can you tell us about the visit
What we
of
have,
the Turkish?
that opposition, the Egyptian opposition, is mostly exiled to Turkey. You know, most of the Egyptian opposition were exiled to Turkey as an Islamist. You know,
Exiled in Turkey, yes.
in Turkey, and really there is a real political and economic problems also facing in Egypt. Already known, the economy. There is negotiations already between Turkey and Egypt about how to deal with the region itself. So, if we said only more money of the Sudanese, also money of the Sudanese, especially on that regime, was exiled to Turkey also. Yes. So this made the role of Islamists in the coming future need to be dealt with. Everyone have to deal with that issue because the failures of 3 years in Sudan and the problems, economic problems that is facing Egypt also makes the whole thing to be revisited altogether. So likely, it is my guess that this strengthening the relation between Turkey and Egypt is very important because Egypt is very active in the politics of the region, especially in the Arab world, you know. And Turkey was very close in that issue because they are jointly and Muslim countries in a way or another. So their role can be very important for the future of Sudan and the region together. Not only Sudan, but also Egypt, because Egypt itself is facing real problems, especially economically, and political problems also
Opposition,
there
yeah.
because of the opposition are outside of.
Yeah, one thing more, just
have-
1 month, just 1
I
minute.
have different
Yeah,
question in
yes.
your domain.
The problem
We don't
of
have time.
resources, aywa,
Okay.
resources. So I think there is a very active rally of intelligence. Needless to repeat, the intelligence head of Sudan visited US for 10 days. And he came back from there. So most of the intelligences they gathered in Khartoum.
Yes.
So I think there are something related to the control of resources in this part
In
of
this part of the
Africa.
world.
Yeah.
Okay, what I want to ask you with my last question to you about the gold, the mining, Minister of Mining, well, the company of the mining, they are saying that they increased the production and export of gold to about more than last year, about 1.5 tons of gold. But people, they don't see the effect of this, and does this mean that the inflation will go and the dollar will drop, or what do you suggest in 2 minutes?
Yeah,
Tell us
there
about
is
the gold.
actually products that increase the export of gold. That means will result in increasing public revenues and by default should be reflected on per capita income of the Sudanese people. But actually what happened is completely different. At the time the Minister of Mineral Resources increasing export, the economic tightness magnified and increased in Sudan. This is a very contradictory and paradoxical position. So I think the gold proceeds are not included 100% in the public revenues. if we use the gold, and also there are some sort of mismanagement. Several times I mentioned we have to use gold as a reserve to back the national currency
correct.
instead of exporting gold as a raw input, like gum arabic, like sheeps. Raw exports, they harm the economy. It is better to use reserve in central bank and to back the national currency. This is the only way to solve the problem.
The best
No
way.
other way to solve the problem. Exporting gold in a position will enhance smuggling, will enhance avoiding the collections of proceeds of these golds, and will not benefit or improve the positions of the peoples in Sudan. Definitely,
People
the
will not
per
feel
capita-
it. We will not feel
yeah,
it.
will not be reflected in the national income
Because it's
calculations.
not coming,
Will
it's
not,
not adding to the
yeah, it
GDP.
has no clear contribution to GDP of the economy. If you go through the budget, you can easily discover the humble contribution by these
gold.
sectors in the world in the economy.
Okay, that's very good. Thank you very much. I think we came to the end of our episode. Thank you, both of you, Ustad Osman Wash and Associate Professor Manhan, for being with me in this important issue. We will continue next week on the same issues. Thank you, dear viewers, for being with us in the last hour. We hope to see you next week in the same issue, hoping that things will develop to the better. Thank you and bye.